Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland, and in this episode, we're going to be reviewing the Husingveld Sequential Shifter. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Husingveld name, as they make some of the best pedal sets available today. Can such a tiny package really be able to replicate the real sequential shifter's feel? Well, we're going to put this thing through the Sim Racing Garage process and find out. So let's get to it. So now let's take a closer look at what you get when you order a HE sequential shifter. First, we're going to look at the accessories and the mounting stuff before we get to the actual shifter itself. Let's take a look at, first off, you get 3 different shifter shafts. And we'll take a closer look at these over here. And you have a long straight one that's about 3 inches. Well, I'll tell you what, let's just go ahead and measure this. Lay these other guys down. And let's see, it looks like about 95 millimeters long. And here in North America, that's going to be almost 3 3/4 of an inch. See if you can see that. And the threads on these are a 10 mil thread. So any shifter knob that you have that has a 10 mil thread, or you can buy one that has adapters with 10 mil thread adapters, you can actually use different shift knobs. Now, let's look at this other bent shift knob. And this bent one can be used for, well, making the shifter come back to you if you don't like it being straight up and down. It can be used to make it lean over towards you or away from you if that's what you want. Or it can actually lean frontwards from you. So it's nice to have a bent rod in here so you can actually, I mean, most guys I've seen run them like this towards them, and very rarely do I see them flip it around this way. But I've tried these bent knobs bent shafts different ways, and yeah, you can do it more, obviously more positions than just that one. Right. And by the way, this one is about the same size, a little bit shorter because of the bend in it as the first one there. This is more like 92 millimeters, and that's just about just over 3.5, maybe 3/5 on the inches. Then we got this short guy, and he comes in at, let's see, that's about 3 inches, maybe just a hair less than 3 inches. Let me get you a look at that. And of course, that's going to be about 75 mil, 74, somewhere in there. Right. So there's a long thread and there's a short thread to this. The short thread is for the knob, and the long one is for going into the actual shifter. And we'll take a closer look at that in a minute. Let's go ahead and put these back. Right, now let's talk about the shifter knobs that you get with this. You get 3 of them. That's pretty cool that they actually include 3 of these knobs in here. Most shifters only come with 1. So we get this long one, we get a kind of a conical shaped one, and then we get this nice round one, which typically I like to use in an H-pattern shifter. For the sequentials, I usually like to use a longer one. But let's take a closer look at these. And of course, obviously, they have a 10 millimeter thread in them, and they're made of some kind of a plastic that, when I click these together, it has that high-pitched, almost like a cue ball or something like that, a billiards ball. Very tough, hard, brittle plastic, which is great because you want something that's stiff and will transfer the tactical feedback you're getting from the shifter. If you get kind of like a foamy one, you see some of these with big leather coatings on them, or covers on them rather, and you try to use one of those shifters, it really numbs out the feeling you're getting from the shifter. So the big long shifter, let's see how long that one is. These guys don't roll away from me. It is just under 90 mil, or about 3.5 inches. Then we got this little conical one over here, and it comes in around 2 inches. It should be about 50 mil or somewhere in there, about 58 mils. And then we got the little guy, and he is only about 35 mils, or 1.5 inches. Right. So, of course, which one you use is entirely up to you, very subjective when it comes to that kind of stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the mounting on these, or the 2 mounting pieces that you get for this shifter. First, we'll talk about the flat plate. Now, this one is the one I'll be using. I'm not going to be using the desk clamp, even though it's got a very nice desk clamp. We'll see that in a minute. But I'm going to need the shifter to show you this stuff. First off, you can see that it fits just like that, we take these 2 bolts out, and then we'll put this on and put the bolts back on. Very simple to put on. And then we'll have these 2 holes hanging down the bottom so that we can mount it to some profile or a sheet of metal or wood or whatever it is you're going to be mounting this to. Now you could also mount this in a configuration like this. So you actually are going to mount this to something going up and down, or maybe a piece of wood or whatever on the front position, if that's how you're going to mount it. One thing to take note of, though, if you have an 80-20 profile type rig, that this particular configuration is too shallow for a 40 series 80-20 profile. In fact, I have a couple of pieces right here, and we'll take a look at them. There we go. So let's talk about that 40 mil first. And if you see the holes, obviously, if we put this 40 mil next to it, and I'll just go ahead and put it behind it, and then we can get a better look at it. You can see it's not quite making it up to the channel of that 40 mil. And I'm laying it on top of the shifter body right now. So that's just not going to work. Now it works fine when we have it in the configuration where it'll be going down, like this. So in this configuration, if we put the 40 up there, you can see it's got plenty of room to mount to it. But good news is, if you have a 10 series or a 20 series profile, we'll go ahead and flip this thing back over into the frontwards configuration. You can see that this will fit quite well. So we have no problem with a 10 series profile or a 20 series. 15 won't work because 15 is just about exactly like a 40, maybe a few mils off, but yeah. So if you have it made out of, or if you have a bracket that you're going to attach to a 40 that's a 10 series or a 20 series, you won't have any issues. Right, just thought I'd point that out because I'm going to be mounting this to 40, and I was just trying different configurations before I started shooting video just to see what would work and what wouldn't work. Right, so simple enough, and this is the mount I'm going to be using. Let's take a look at the H, well not the H, but I call it a U. All right, this is a U-type bracket. Typical of the kind of brackets we'll see in a desktop situation for desktop mounting, or mounting on a piece of wood or a piece of metal, whatever, that we're going to be clamping it to. So we got a couple of parts here that comes with this, and I'm going to show that over here. First off, we've got a 13 mil nut that's kind of sticking out a little bit down here, and that's what we'll use for the final tightening once you get this to where you want it to be, as far as the thickness of whatever you're mounting it to. But of course we have to take into account that we've got this rubber pad that's going to go underneath that and just kind of sit there. That'll keep it from gouging up your metal or your wooden desktop or whatever that you're going to be using as far as mounting this. And it also serves another purpose. When we actually mount this to the bottom of the shifter housing only has 2 holes. And you'll notice, of course, this has 4 holes. Well, that means that we can, in this position right there would be front ways, then we got holes that will accommodate that, and if we wanted to mount it the other way, then we have holes that will accommodate that mount configuration also. Right, so that's when we have 4 holes. And it's, of course, a simple matter of just setting this on top of here, taking our screws and tightening it down. And once the screws are in here, they'll be sitting in here like this. And you can see that they're a little bit proud, obviously, of the flat. They're not a flathead screw, and these are not counterbore holes. And that's why they use this. It's thicker than the top of that screw there. You can see that. And once we lay this on top, you can still see the screw in there, but you can't see the head of the screw up here. So that'll keep the screws from marring up or getting engaged with whatever material it is that you're actually clamping it to. Right, pretty simple stuff here, and this bracket is very nice. Actually, all the stainless steel is nice in this shifter, and it's typical of all of the Husingveld products that they use the stainless steel. I believe they use a water jet to cut this with because of the finishes, or either somebody's filing these edges down before they actually send it out to the customer. But I believe it's water jet cut. Could be laser, could be wrong, but it just feels like water jet, which is very nice. Very thick stainless steel. Yeah, this thing is, you're going to have to put a lot of weight and pressure on this to bend this. In fact, it would be way beyond, I suppose, what you'd want to put on the sequential shifter. If you ever got this bent, you'd probably just be destroying your sequential at the same time. Right. All right, so those are our 2 mounting options. And what else we get with this? Okay, we get a USB cable. And that's just got the mini USB and a regular USB type A on that. Now let's talk about the shifter itself. Take a closer look here. Now, first off, you'll see that it's got a cool plastic piece here covering the circuit board. And the circuit board obviously is going to have a mini USB over here for connecting to your computer. And the cool thing is they've actually put a Molex plug over here, and that is 4 pins. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see this in this video, but it's also got some laser etching on this plastic or Lexan or plexiglass, whatever this is. And it says USB here, and over here it has a G, a 1, 2, and a G. So what that means is you can connect some kind of a controller, SimCraft, or some other USB controller to this unit. And if you look on the board itself, you'll see both ends of this Molex connector over here and over here is actually got the G, and that stands for ground. And then we have 2 in the middle. It says 1, 2, but on the actual board it says switch 1 and switch 2. So if you wanted to configure another controller and connect it to this, then you could for extra buttons or something like that. Right, very cool. And of course, there's got some switches on the back of this circuit board that's actually doing the shifting duties. Now on the side, you see these big black covers here. Well, they're just actually, let's see if I can pull one off. They can get stiff, and I've had them off before. There we go. But that's good. You want them stiff, you don't want them coming off. But here's a tension adjustment for this. And we have one on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and pull the other one off too, since I have it off. If I can get it to come. They can be a little stiff. There we go. All right. So here we have a 19 mil nut and of course a set screw that has a big groove in it that we're going to put a screwdriver in. And it's a simple matter of taking a 19 mil wrench and breaking that nut loose just like that. See, now it's loose. And this is a big slot, so I got a big old Big Daddy screwdriver here to put in that. And so of course all we're going to do is unscrew it screw it counterclockwise to loosen and clockwise to tighten the tension. So this is how we're going to adjust the tension. And the tension probably, I would say, needs to be adjusted so that they're at the same length. You can just count the threads that are exposed above the nut there to make sure that you've got equal pressure on both sides. That's typically how these things work. You don't want one side to be tighter than the other. And using distance is probably the best way to do it, considering that the springs inside are going to be the same tension, which I imagine they are. And I imagine there's like a little ball bearing in there or something that gets captured in this screw. But we'll see that actually, because you know what we're going to do. We're going to be taking this apart so we can see how this works. Right. All right, so we can see up, and that's really all there is to it. Now, when you put your bracket on, there's that bracket, then what you're going to do here is, let's get this thing straight up and down. Let's go this way with it. So I want to put that bracket on. I'll take those screws off. You don't want to disassemble the whole unit when you do that. You just want to, let me get this thing lined up, there it is. You just want to take one side off. And that reasoning is, and we'll find out once we get inside why you need to just do that. You want to take both of them out, or loosen both of them. You only need to take these two out and leave the other side tight, depending on which side you're mounting your bracket on. So just something to be mindful of. Easy adjustments. I like the way, I really like what I'm seeing here. Again, beautiful stainless steel finish here. It's like a bead blasted type thing, satin or something. So again, I wouldn't expect anything less from Huizenveld. The guys over there do a great job with this stuff. It's got some nice weight to it. It feels substantial. You look down the top here, obviously where the shifter shaft is going to go. And if you notice on the top here, there are no threads. And that's why these shifter shafts are long. Have these long threads on one side like that, because they're actually going to pass through this thing. And we're going to go ahead and put a shifter on just for the heck of it, seeing how we're this far into it. And well, we can't do it yet, obviously. Let's do it the right way. We have to use this nut right here, and it is a 17 mil. And I'll get my 19 mil out of the way here. And we have to run this on top of or down these threads before we put a shaft on. And that's going to act as a locking nut against the top of this little receiving hole plate that they've got. So all we got to do is run that down, and then we're just going to stick it in the top. And it's actually reaching the threads that are down lower here. And once we have it tightened down to the height we want, then we can just snug it up with our hands. But of course the final tightening is going to be with a 17 millimeter wrench. Just snug it up. That's all you should ever need to do, just snug it a little bit. And then of course we can take the shifter knob of our choice and put it on there, and this is not really my choice. I'm just grabbing the first one. I don't know if I'm going to end up with that or not. And there we go. There we have it. Ready to go. Very simple, very compact little shifter. I really like this. It's really small. In fact, let's see how small this thing is. All right, so I got on the length on this, I'm looking at about 72 millimeters. So that makes it about, what, 3 inches? No, actually less than 3 inches, about 2 3/4 of an inch long. And it's only like 2 inches tall. And that's 50 mils, about 50 mils tall. And wide, well, wide, it's not very wide at all, obviously. It's not going to be very wide. It's so tiny. 35 millimeters for the width, or what was that, a little over an inch? Yeah, about almost an inch and a half, maybe inch and 3/8. So very, very tiny. And actually, I kind of like this. It's very compact, and it feels good. I've already been running it a little bit, because I always run these things before I start doing the video on it, just to get an idea what it feels like and what it's doing. So yeah, it really is very small, but it's got a nice shift feel to it, and we'll talk more about that later too. So only thing left to do now is, well, disassemble this thing. Time to crack this puppy open and just see how this thing works and see what kind of parts are inside. So we'll get to that part next. All right, so now we can actually take this thing apart and see how this works. First of all, what I want to do is, obviously with these tensioners here, they give us the tension when we're using the shifter. I want to make sure these are loose before I start taking anything off. Don't want anything to be under spring pressure and pop off somewhere and parts go flying. Mini disaster. So what we're going to do is take our 19 mil wrench and go ahead and loosen these tensioners up. And once I have it loose, I'll just spin it a little bit inside there. And you can tell when it's loose, it's kind of shaking around. Go ahead and get the other side. Loosen that up. And as soon as I did that, I felt this go limp, the internal cam here. You can see it's kind of just flopping around now, that's the way I want it before I start pulling it apart. Right. So either side, it really doesn't matter, I guess. I'm guessing here. Obviously, I don't know for sure. But what I'm going to do is, these are 5 mil cap head sockets. And we're going to get our 5 mil wrench and go ahead and just pull these out. And I'm going to pull both of them out at once, because I got a feeling it's not going to come off with one of these in and one of them out, is it? Now this one's a little bit tighter. This one feels like it's got more friction on it right on top here. So I just pay attention to those kind of things when I'm taking something apart. And I'm also going to be looking for any wires or anything, obviously, before. Here, even though these don't stick in magnets because they're stainless steel. But it's good to have a little tray to put them in. So we'll go ahead and pull this last guy out. All right. So now, this is just a tensioner, so I'm imagining it's not connected to anything on their side, and I can see it's kind of loose here. So only thing is, this is a very tight fitting cover here with these little slots and the little tabs that go in there. So I'm going to have to kind of work this thing off, I would imagine. I'm holding it up. Typically I would have this flat on the table like this when I was doing it, but even though it's not going to be flat because of this tensioner, probably could pull that tensioner all the way out, but it looks like it's coming out anyway. So there we go. All right, so I'll carefully turn this over and see what I'm up against, and well, that's pretty cool. Nothing flying anywhere. Let's take a look at this tensioner here, and you can see we have a 19 mil nut on the other side of this plate, and there's the ball that provides the tension, and I'm pretty sure that's probably under spring pressure. Let me turn that back to where it was. But I tell you, I can't push this down. Let me see. There it goes. Apparently there's a lot of spring pressure on this, because you can't push it in with your finger, but obviously there's a spring in there. So that's how we do our tension. And the tensioner actually rides against this hole in here. Where's my pointer? There it is. This oblongish hole. Notice how it's not just a round hole, but it has actually a taper, or is kind of a cam shape to it. So that gives it that cam feel when it rises out of this hole when we're doing our shifts, and then falls back in when we come back from the shift. So we've got a little blue piece in here. It looks like it's just a threaded spacer or standoff, and with some tubing on it. Let's take a look at that closer later on. And it looks like we have a couple of washers or something, or bushings or something here, probably used to space this piece, this little, I'm going to call this the major cam, the main cam, and it's to get it spaced properly there so it's not leaning up against one edge or the other of this hole here. So first I'm going to try to take these off, see what happens. Oh, okay, these are really loose, no big deal here. So looks like we've got one plastic spacer. And keep these all together as you take them off, because we want to make sure that we put them back on in the same sequence. Looks like we got a washer here, or actually two washers in another spacer. So let me show you these washers, but let me pull this spacer off of here. So let's set that aside. So here's these two little washers that are in between those spacers. You can see they're very thin units. Very thin. So I would imagine these might be like some kind of a spacer, is performing a spacer function. Because they're so thin, you can add a few of these and be able to space that main cam assembly in there, make sure it's centered. At least that's my theory. Right, so we're going to put these to the side. And now what we're going to do is, obviously, these are not going to come off the way they are right now, because obviously we have our bolts on the other side still. So we're going to have to take these bolts out. Now, when I do this, I'm going to take the bottom one out where the blue piece is first. And I'm suspecting that blue piece is some kind of a bumper that they're using for. Let me go ahead and hold it. I gotta kind of hold it all together here while I'm doing this so it doesn't slide around or twist. A bumper to soften the blows of our shifts. So I'll pull that out. And there we have it. Okay. All right. So this actually says ethane, so maybe urethane or something thane. And you can see in here, I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's like got these little fibers in here, like it's got a fiber mesh reinforcement in this, and even the pattern or the texture of the top indicates that also. I'm guessing some kind of a fuel hose maybe here. Very tough stuff it feels like, and you can see it's already got a dent in there where I've been shifting on it. And if we ever wore through that, no big deal. All we got to do is turn it, take the side off, loosen it up, and turn it a little bit, and we got a whole new section to start hammering on. So this should last a long time. It's very quiet, and this is one of the reasons why it's quiet, obviously. It's hitting this every time we make a shift. All right, set that over here. Now, we've got the main pivot standoff here, and sleeve, whatever you want to call it. And what we're going to do is take the bolt loose over here, and because, remember, we had some washers and spacers over here, I guarantee we got some over there, so I'm going to try my best not to let them go flying everywhere. So I'm going to kind of put my finger and keep some pressure on that as I try to loosen this. There we go. I almost had to put the other bolt back in the other side to hold it to get it loose. Right. So let's go ahead and pull that loose. And I'm just pulling it out so that the washers, it's got to be some washers in there and spacers. Don't go flying everywhere. But they're probably going to end up going flying anyway once I pull this out. So now we're loose. Right here, you can see this thing's just moving around freely. So I'm going to try to slide it off, or actually I'm just going to pull the spacer out first. And there they go. You just heard a tink tink. Apparently the washers came out. So there's the other spacer, or sleeve, or standoff, whatever you want to call it, threaded on both sides, just like the other one. Put it over here. And yeah, you can actually see down in there, those washers. They're laying down there. But we're going to pull this cam off. Now, this cam, you can see these prongs in the back here. And they're actually manipulating the switch levers when we're going forward or backwards, upshift, downshift. So we have to be mindful of that prong back there in the back that's not catching on anything as we pull this out, because you could really tear up the board really easily by doing that. So I'm going to kind of tilt it this way, try to keep the weight off of it, and just get my finger in there and see if I can't just tilt this up a little to get that other prong clear, if that's even possible. There it goes. And I got those washers back there, so I don't want to dump it over too far. I'll dump everything out. All right, so we've got that out, and we'll take a look at that in a second. And there's our other washers. So it looks like we have two of those nylon spacers in the washers. Let me get those out. Okay, nylon spacers we can put over here. So it looks like the nylon spacers are two on each side. And we'll pull these washers out and see what we got. All right. Oh, got three here. So, again, that again lends to my guess that this is actually acting, these washers are actually in a spacing mode so that they've spaced it out properly to make sure this internal cam, because that's what I'm calling this assembly here, is even within that casing. So let's take a look at this. We've got a nice bronze bushing in there. I don't know if that's impregnated with lubrication or not. I know some of them you can buy that way, but I don't know. I don't see a lot of grease on it, so maybe it is. We've got, of course, all of this is stainless steel. And again, they do a great job with this over at Hosingveld. They're just, you know, I love this. It's like water. It's got to be water jet. It's so smooth on the edges. And water jet's more expensive to cut than laser jet. I don't know, or rather laser cutting metal than, because the water jets are more expensive in general. I don't know if you've ever seen that or know that, but anyway, it's nice to see that they're using water jets. Or they're doing a heck of a job filing this stuff down and finishing it. Again, the stainless steel has all got that brushed or bead blasted look to it. And we can see we've got some standoffs here that are actually acting as separators for keeping everything the width it needs to be. Got one back here. And there's those two prongs we're talking about that when we're actually shifting this thing up and back, that they're manipulating those switches. All right. Oh, one more thing I want to show you. And remember, it was no threads up here. And what are we threading? You can see on the bottom here, we're actually threading into a nut that is captured between these two plates. Very clever. It's not going anywhere. And they didn't have to actually tap, or rather drill holes in something and then tap threads into it, when you can just put a nut in there and capture it in those little side pockets here. Very cool. I would take this apart, but really there's nothing else to see here. It would just have a bunch of parts on the table then. Right. So, only thing left is the circuit board. So if circuit board ever went bad on you, you want to take it out, right? I know I want to take it out. So anyway, it's got a couple switches on the back there. You can see those. And I'm going to carefully try to take this out without messing it up. I'd hate to have to send Niels an email and go, hey, how much would a new circuit board cost? So I'm just going to kind of wiggle it as I pull on it, and it looks like it's going to go ahead and come out. I hope there it goes. And the plastic is coming with it because, go ahead and set this aside. It's got the hole for that USB port, obviously. Sort of this way. So we can actually just pull that off now that it's free. And again, you can see that silk screening. I'll go to my black shirt there. You can see it better. Yeah. Right. So we have our circuit board with that Molex connector we talked about before. And I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, but I'm going to go ahead and hold it there so you can see the little S on the bottom there. It's S1 and S2 for switch 1 and switch 2. And back of the board, of course, where the business, of course, is where the business section is. And we have our little switches here. My pointer. That obviously this shifter is going to be going against these. It's down. You can hear it there. And this one gets pushed up when we're pushing forwards or going for a downshift, if that's the way you have your setup. And we can actually see some information here on this board. I don't know how well you're going to be able to read that, but it's talking about the revision of this board and what it's for. Right. Nice clean board. There's no plugs here except for obviously the plugs in the front as far as plugging a switch on or something. So this doesn't look like it's a typical repairable board that if something went wrong they just give you a whole new board, or you have to buy a whole new board, unless you want to try to solder a switch on in there, which wouldn't be too difficult if you have the right tools. But yeah, I'm sure that just go ahead and send you another board if you burn one out. Right. Nothing else to see here, I guess. I think that about covers it. So what we'll do next is put everything back together, of course, and then we'll go ahead and get the shifter mounted onto my rig and see how that looks before we start driving it. This is what the shifter looks like now that I have it mounted to the 80/20 profile. And it's sitting just above the profile, you can see there. You can't see any light under there because of the bracket on the other side is blocking it. So it doesn't sit flat on the profile, which really is no big deal because I'll go over here and move this shifter. You can see how it's not moving at all. And it's very quiet too, if you noticed. And that's because of that blue fuel tubing that's around that standoff. Makes it very, very quiet. Let's just fly around the top of it here. And we'll look down here and you can see where it's mounted with some 6mm screws into the profile on this side. Okay, right. Well, that's about all there is to as far as mounting it. And now what we'll do is go ahead and get in the cockpit and drive it a bit. All right, so here we are in iRacing, and we're in a V8 supercar. This is the Holden, and I thought that would be an appropriate car to use for a sequential shifter because it uses one, obviously. So we're going to superimpose the shifter. There it is. So you can get another angle of it while I'm using it. Maybe give a better idea of how far the throws are and that kind of thing. This is a short throw shifter. You don't have to go very far to actually complete the shift. And it has a very nice soft feeling to it when you reach the end of the shift because of that blue fuel line that's on the standoff that they're using as an end stop. And if you saw the look inside section of the video, you would have seen that. So no matter how hard, well, you can actually adjust the spring ball, I found, hard enough to where it won't, you can still shift, but the shifter won't return back to the actual hole, that oblong hole that you would have seen in the look inside part of the video. So you can't adjust it, but it's so tight. So I got as tight as I could without it stopping. And it gives you a nice, like I said, initial feel that you're turning maybe the selector shaft in a synchro. And then you're out of that hole right away once that spring ball depresses as you're pushing forward or backwards. And then it's just a smooth little short throw up to the end stop, which is really all you need when you're actually using a sequential. Obviously, you don't have to have a long throw or anything like that, but it is noticeably short, but it doesn't really affect anything as far as knowing you made a shift. You definitely can feel that you've made a shift. Now, it doesn't give you the mechanical feel of, say, the Pro Sim sequential that I have, but you wouldn't expect it to, and of course that costs like twice as much anyway. But you do feel like you're actually pushing against something for that initial push or pull. And that's, again, that's all you really need for a sequential. You also feel how solid it is when you're going back and forth with it. And when you reach that end stop, it's a nice hard stop that you know that you're at the end, and there's no, even though you had that little soft bump, it's like a very hard soft bump, if you can understand, if that makes sense. So again, such a small package. It's amazing what they've packed into this little shifter, and this makes it great for mounting in tight situations and if you have a cockpit that you don't have a lot of room. And there's a lot to be said for this shifter on how quiet it is. I'm going to call it the stealth shifter because it's so darn quiet. And it's great if you're going to be using it somewhere where somebody's trying to sleep or do their homework or something. A set of headphones in this sequential shifter, as long as your pedals aren't too loud, obviously, then you shouldn't be disturbing anyone. That's how quiet this thing is. I've never had a shifter that was this quiet. It's pretty amazing, actually. And it's just a nice, steady, always there. The feel is always consistent. You're never guessing how far you're going to be pushing it or how far you're going to be pulling it before you make your shift. And I like that. You can just forget it's there. And that's really what you need to be able to do with most of the gear when you're racing. You just want to forget it's there and not really notice it that much as you're involved in the heat of a race when you're battling for position. Right. So I guess that's enough of me talking about. There's really not much else to say here. I like this shifter. It's a nice package. It's built like a tank. If you saw the look inside, you guys know that. There's stainless steel everywhere in here. And yeah, I would imagine this shifter is going to have a very, very long life cycle. And you won't have to worry about it breaking. I think the only thing I would even think could ever break would be one of the switches, and just replacing the circuit board would take care of that. Right. So what we'll do is go ahead and drive a little bit more on Sebring here, and then I'll see you guys over at the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the Husingveld sequential shifter. When I first saw pictures of this shifter after its release, I wondered how such a small package could produce the feeling of a proper sequential shifter. All you have to do is see this thing next to other sequential shifters out there on the market to have some doubts. So small compared to, say, the Fanatic CSS and ProSim Light sequentials you see here. How can you squeeze the mechanicals into such a small footprint? But that small size does have some advantages if you have limited space in your rig for mounting. Once you take a look inside, you can see how they made this work. Stainless steel is everywhere you look. Built like the proverbial tank, I would say. And shifting this sequential does give the feeling of engaging something mechanical. Not to the level of my ProSim sequential, but it is there. When the spring ball is pushed past the oblong hole that it rests in, it gives you that sensation of the initial resistance you would feel in using a real shifter. At the limit of the shifter's throw, there is a feeling of a soft landing, due to the rubber tubing used to dampen the force of hitting the end stop. Another thing that surprised me is just, well, how quiet this shifter is compared to the others I've used, lending itself to being used at times when other shifters just wouldn't be tolerated. A very useful feature if you live in tight quarters and like to race at night when somebody's trying to sleep. I like the mounting options that you have with this shifter, something for almost everyone, I think. Receiving 3 different shifter shafts and knobs is another bonus. The most I've ever received with any other shifter is 2 knobs and 2 shafts. And the second shaft, well, it was really just an extension anyway. So, you do get a lot for the money you spent in the Husingveld package. That, combined with the legendary customer service, makes this a shifter I would have to put at the top part of my list as far as buying a sequential shifter is concerned. That's it for now. I'm Barry Rowland, and thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel.